You ever feel like you're invisible? Like no matter what you do, people look right through you, or worse, they see you and decide you're not worth their time? That was my entire life until 3 years ago, when my name showed up in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and CNN all in the same week. The same people who called me a loser, a dropout, a waste of space, they were suddenly calling my phone, sending emails, showing up at my door. But by then, I didn't need them anymore. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 32 years old, and I grew up in a small town outside Portland, Oregon, the kind of place where everyone knows your business and nobody lets you forget your mistakes. My father, Richard Webb, was a successful real estate developer. My mother, Catherine, was a high school principal. My older brother, Jason, was the golden child, varsity quarterback, valedictorian, full ride to Stanford, MBA from Wharton. Then there was me. I barely graduated high school. I tried community college for 1 semester and dropped out. I worked dead-end jobs, stocking shelves at a grocery store, washing dishes at a diner, delivering pizzas. My family didn't just disapprove. They were ashamed. My father would introduce Jason to his colleagues with pride, chest puffed out, hand on his shoulder. When someone asked about me, Dad would clear his throat and change the subject. My mother tried to be kinder, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes every time I walked into a room. Thanksgiving dinners were the worst. The whole family would gather, aunts, uncles, cousins, and Jason would talk about his latest promotion, his new car, his investment portfolio. Then someone would turn to me. "So Marcus, what are you up to these days?" I'd feel the weight of every eye in the room. The silence would stretch like a rubber band about to snap. Still figuring things out, I'd mumble. My Uncle Steve would laugh, not a kind laugh, but the kind that cuts. "At your age, Jason was already running a division. You're still figuring things out." My father wouldn't defend me. He'd just take another sip of wine and look away. I remember one night, I was 26, still living in a cramped studio apartment that smelled like mildew and old carpet. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone. Jason had just posted on social media about closing a $10 million deal. The comments were flooded with congratulations. I scrolled through them, my chest tight, my throat dry. I opened a text thread with my dad. I'd sent him a message 2 weeks earlier, asking if he wanted to grab lunch. He'd left me on read. I typed, "I know you're disappointed in me. I'm trying." I stared at the message for 5 minutes. Then I deleted it. What was the point? That same week, I was working the late shift at a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. It was 2 in the morning, and the place was dead except for a couple of truckers and a drunk guy nursing black coffee. I was wiping down tables when the door chimed. Jason walked in, wearing a tailored suit even at that hour. He wasn't alone, he had 3 colleagues with him, all laughing, all polished. He saw me. For a second, our eyes met. I waited for him to say something, anything. Maybe he'd introduce me. Maybe he'd acknowledge me. Instead, he looked away. He sat down with his group at a booth in the corner and acted like I didn't exist. I brought them menus. My hands were shaking. "Coffee for the table," Jason said, not looking up. "Sure thing," I said quietly. One of his colleagues glanced at my name tag. "Marcus, huh? You related to Jason Webb? He's got a brother named Marcus." Jason's jaw tightened. He finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Nah," Jason said smoothly. "Different guy." I stood there, coffee pot in hand, frozen. My own brother had just erased me. I finished my shift in a fog. When I got home, I sat on the floor of my apartment, back against the wall, and cried for the first time in years. Not because I was sad, because I was so tired of being nothing. And then I discovered something that would change everything. Let me take you back. Let me show you exactly how I became the family disappointment. I wasn't always the screw-up. When I was a kid, I was curious, creative. I loved taking things apart, clocks, radios, old computers my dad would throw away. I'd spread the pieces across the garage floor and try to figure out how they worked. Sometimes I'd even put them back together. Most times I didn't. My father hated it. "Marcus, stop wasting time with that junk," he'd say, stepping over circuit boards and wires. You should be outside playing sports like Jason. But I wasn't Jason. I wasn't built for football or baseball. I was small for my age, uncoordinated, more interested in what was inside things than what they could do. My mother tried to encourage me in her own way. She'd buy me science kits for Christmas, books about inventors. But when my grades started slipping in middle school, her patience wore thin. "You're smart, Marcus," she'd say, arms crossed, standing in my doorway. "You're just lazy. If you applied yourself." "I am applying myself," I'd interrupt. "Just not to the stuff you care about." Her face would harden. "Then what you're doing doesn't matter." High school was worse. Jason was a senior when I was a freshman. Everyone knew him. Teachers would light up when they saw my last name on the roster, then their faces would fall when they realized I wasn't him. "Oh, you're Jason's brother," my English teacher, Mrs. Kowalski, said on the first day. "He was one of my best students. I'm sure you'll live up to the family name." I didn't. I got CS and DS. I skipped classes. I sat in the back of the room doodling circuit diagrams in my notebook instead of paying attention. My counselor called my parents in for a meeting junior year. "Marcus is capable," she said, looking at me with something close to pity. "But he's not trying. At this rate, he'll barely graduate." My father's voice was ice. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" I looked him in the eye. "Because I'm not Jason." He stood up. "Then maybe you should try harder to be." That night, Jason found me sitting on the curb outside our house. He sat down next to me, silent for a minute. "You know," he said quietly, "you make it harder on yourself." "How?" I asked. "You could try. You could do what they want. It's not that hard." I laughed bitterly. "It's easy for you. You're good at what they want." "I'm not." Jason shook his head. "Then figure out what you're good at and do that." "I'm trying." "Doesn't look like it," he said. Then he stood up and went inside. I graduated high school by the skin of my teeth. My parents didn't throw me a party. Jason had gotten a full academic scholarship to Stanford. I'd gotten nothing. My father handed me a community college brochure at dinner. "You start in the fall," he said. Not a question. A command. I tried. I really did. I enrolled in general classes, math, English, history. But I couldn't focus. The lectures felt like static. I'd sit in the back row, staring at my notebook, drawing designs for machines I didn't know how to build. After one semester, I stopped showing up. When my parents found out, my father called me into his office. He didn't yell. That would have been easier. "I'm done," he said, his voice flat. "I've given you every opportunity. You've wasted all of them. Dad, I'm not paying for your apartment anymore. I'm not giving you another dime. You want to throw your life away? Fine. But you'll do it on your own." My mother stood in the doorway, her face pale. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I moved out the next week. I found the cheapest apartment I could, $450 a month, roaches in the kitchen, a bathroom with no lock. I worked whatever jobs I could get. I stopped going to family dinners. I stopped answering my phone. When Jason got married, I wasn't invited to the bachelor party. At the wedding, I sat in the back alone. My father gave a toast about how proud he was of his son. Singular, not sons. For years, I believed what they believed, that I was nothing, that I'd never amount to anything, that I was the mistake in the family tree. And then, on a cold night in February, 3 years ago, I was scrolling through YouTube in my apartment. I clicked on a video about coding, just out of curiosity, and something clicked. I thought to myself, maybe this is it. Maybe this is what I've been looking for. I had no idea that thought would change everything. Marcus started teaching himself to code that night. He found free tutorials online, spent hours watching videos, typing lines of code into a battered laptop he'd bought used for $200. Python, JavaScript, HTML, languages that finally made sense to him in a way algebra never had. He was obsessed. He'd come home from his shift at the diner at 3 in the morning, collapse onto his bed for 4 hours, then wake up and code until his next shift. His eyes burned. His back ached. He lived on instant ramen and black coffee. But for the first time in his life, he felt like he was good at something. 6 months in, he built his first real project, A simple app that helped restaurant workers track their tips and shifts. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. He showed it to his coworker, a woman named Denise who'd been waitressing for 20 years. "This is actually useful," she said, surprised. "You made this?" Marcus nodded, his chest swelling with something unfamiliar. "Pride. You should show your family," Denise said. "I bet they'd be impressed." Marcus hesitated. Then he made a mistake. He believed her. He drove to his parents' house on a Sunday afternoon. Jason's car was in the driveway, a black Mercedes, spotless. Marcus's hands were sweating as he rang the doorbell. His mother answered. Her smile was polite but strained. "Marcus, we weren't expecting you." "I know. I wanted to show you something." She let him in. The house smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary. Jason was sitting in the living room with his wife, Emily, and their 2-year-old daughter, Grace. His father sat in his leather recliner, reading the newspaper. "Hey," Marcus said. Jason glanced up. "Marcus, what's up?" Marcus pulled out his laptop. His hands were shaking. "I've been working on something. I taught myself to code, and I built this app. It's for people in the service industry to help them." "You learned to code?" His father interrupted, not looking up from his paper. "Yeah, online. For free. And I think it's actually pretty good. I mean, people are using it and—" Richard folded his newspaper and finally looked at Marcus. His expression was hard. "How much money have you made from it?" Marcus's throat went dry. "Well, nothing yet. It's free right now. But I'm working on." "So you're still broke," Richard said. The room went silent. "Dad, it's not about money right now. It's about building something, proving I can." "Proving what?" Richard's voice was sharp now. "That you can waste more time?" "Marcus, you're 29 years old. Jason was running a team of 30 people at your age. You're playing with apps that make no money." "It's not playing," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "I'm trying to build a career." "I'm trying to. You're trying to avoid real work." His father cut him off. "That's what you've always done." Jason shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, maybe?" "Stay out of this, Jason." Richard stood up, towering over Marcus. "I'm tired of watching you throw your life away. Every time you show up here, it's with some new excuse. Some new project. And where does it get you? Nowhere." Marcus felt his eyes burning. He wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of them. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "I understand perfectly," Richard said. "You're 30 years old, delivering pizzas, living in a shoebox, playing on a computer. You're an embarrassment." The word hung in the air like smoke. Marcus looked at his mother. She was staring at her hands. She wouldn't meet his eyes. He looked at Jason. His brother's jaw was tight, but he said nothing. "I should go," Marcus said. Nobody stopped him. He drove back to his apartment in silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. When he got home, he sat on the floor of his kitchen, his laptop open in front of him. He stared at the app he'd built. The thing he'd been so proud of just an hour ago. He thought about deleting it, about giving up, about proving his father right. But something stopped him. A small, stubborn voice in the back of his mind that whispered, "What if he's wrong?" Marcus opened a new browser tab. He started researching startup accelerators, coding bootcamps, investors. He read until his eyes blurred, until the sun came up and light filtered through his grimy window. And he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He wasn't going to quit. He was going to prove every single one of them wrong, no matter what it took. 2 weeks after that humiliating Sunday, Marcus was working the closing shift at the diner when everything changed. It was a slow night. Just him, Denise, and the cook. Marcus was wiping down the counter when a man in his 50s walked in, wearing jeans and a faded hoodie. He ordered coffee and sat at the bar, pulling out a laptop covered in startup stickers. Marcus noticed the GitHub logo. "You a developer?" The man looked up, smiling. "Yeah, you." Marcus hesitated. "I'm learning. Self-taught." "Best kind," the man said, extending his hand. Carl Mitchum. They talked for 2 hours. Carl was a former Google engineer who'd quit to build his own company. He'd failed twice, succeeded once, and now he mentored early-stage founders. When Marcus showed him the tip tracking app, Carl studied it carefully. "This is solid work," Carl said. "Rough around the edges, but the logic is clean." "How long you been coding?" "About 8 months." Carl's eyebrows shot up. 8 months? "And you built this?" Marcus nodded. "What are you doing working here?" The question hit Marcus like a punch. I need to pay rent." Carl leaned forward. "Listen to me carefully. You have talent. Raw talent. But talent means nothing if you don't take a real shot at it. You need structure. You need to surround yourself with people who know more than you. You need to go all in." "I don't have money for a boot camp," Marcus said. "I don't have a degree." "Nobody's going to." "There's a free program in Portland," Carl interrupted. "It's competitive as hell, but if you get in, they teach you for 6 months, then help place you at companies. No cost. You just have to be good enough." He scribbled a name on a napkin. "Apply. Tonight." Marcus stared at the napkin. "What if I don't get in?" "Then you're exactly where you are now," Carl said. "But what if you do?" After Carl left, Marcus stood behind the counter, the napkin in his hand. He thought about his father's words. "You're an embarrassment." He thought about Jason's face, the way he'd looked away instead of defending him. He thought about every dinner, every family gathering, every moment he'd been made to feel small. And then he thought, "I'm done asking for their approval." He pulled out his phone and called Denise over. "I need to quit," he said. Denise blinked. "What? When?" 2 weeks. "I'm going to apply for this program. If I get in, I need to focus. No distractions." "Marcus, are you sure?" "What if?" "I'm sure." His voice was steady now, stronger than it had been in years. "I've spent my whole life playing it safe because I was scared of failing. And I failed anyway. I'm not doing that anymore." Denise smiled. "Then go show them what you're made of." Marcus applied that night. The application required 3 coding challenges and an essay. He worked on it for 72 hours straight, barely sleeping, living on energy drinks and adrenaline. When he finally hit submit, his hands were shaking. 3 weeks later, he got the email. "Congratulations. You've been accepted into the TechBridge Accelerator program." Marcus read it 5 times. Then he called his mother. Not to brag, just to share. That's wonderful, Marcus," Catherine said, her voice cautious. "But how will you pay your bills?" "I'll figure it out," Marcus said. "I just wanted to tell you. Does your father know?" "Not yet." There was a long pause. "Maybe you should focus on something more stable, honey. This coding thing." Marcus hung up. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. He called his landlord and negotiated moving to a cheaper studio. He sold his car and started biking everywhere. He picked up weekend shifts at a grocery store to cover rent. Every other waking moment, he was at the program learning algorithms, frameworks, databases, system design. He was the oldest person in his cohort by 5 years, but he didn't care. He worked harder than anyone. His instructor, a woman named Priya, pulled him aside after the first month. "You're doing well," she said, "but you're holding back. You code like you're afraid of being wrong." Marcus swallowed hard. "I've been wrong my whole life. According to my family, at least." Priya looked him in the eye. "Then stop coding for them. Code for you." Something shifted in Marcus that day. He stopped second-guessing himself. He stopped waiting for permission. He built projects that mattered to him, tools for gig workers, apps for people overlooked by Silicon Valley. And 6 months later, when he graduated top of his cohort, he had 3 job offers. But he didn't take any of them. Instead, he did something that would change everything. He decided to build his own company. Marcus turned down all 3 job offers and made a decision that terrified him. He was going to build a company from scratch. The idea came from his own experience. For years, he'd worked gig jobs, delivery driver, freelance work, hourly shifts with no stability. He'd seen how these workers were treated like disposable parts in a machine. No benefits, no security, no voice. He wanted to build something that gave them power. The app was called ShiftBridge. It allowed gig workers to band together, share information about which companies paid fairly, which ones had safe working conditions, and which ones exploited their people. It had forums, shift swap features, and a rating system. It was part Glassdoor, part Union Hall, part survival guide. He built the first version alone, in his tiny apartment, over 3 months. He barely slept. He ate peanut butter sandwiches and instant oatmeal. His back ached from sitting hunched over his laptop. But every line of code felt like an act of defiance. When he launched it, he had no expectations. He posted it on Reddit, in Facebook groups for gig workers, anywhere he could think of. Then he waited. The first week, 30 people signed up. The second week, 300. By the end of the first month, ShiftBridge had 5,000 users. Marcus couldn't believe it. He'd check his phone at 2 in the morning and see notifications flooding in, reviews, forum posts, messages thanking him. A delivery driver in Seattle wrote, "This app saved me from taking a job that would have screwed me over. Thank you." Marcus sat in his apartment, reading that message, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. But building a company with no money was brutal. He couldn't afford server costs once the user base grew. He couldn't hire help. He worked the grocery store on weekends, coded during the week, and survived on 4 hours of sleep a night. Some days he wanted to quit. The exhaustion was crushing. But every time he opened the app and saw people helping each other, he pushed forward. Then, for months in, he got a message from someone named Elena Torres. She was a labor organizer in Portland who'd heard about ShiftBridge from her community. They met at a coffee shop. Elena was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, no nonsense. "Your app is good," she said. "But it could be better. You're thinking too small." Marcus bristled. "What do you mean?" "You built a platform for sharing information. That's useful. But what if workers could actually organize through it? What if they could collectively bargain with companies, negotiate for better pay, better conditions?" Marcus's mind started racing. That's a much bigger project." "It is," Elena said. "But it's also what workers actually need. And I can help you. I know the labor movement. You know the tech. We could build something real." Marcus hesitated. He'd been alone for so long. Trusting someone felt dangerous. But then he thought about Carl, the man who'd pushed him to apply to the program. About Priya, who'd told him to stop coding for other people. About every person who'd believed in him when his own family didn't. "Okay," Marcus said. "Let's do it." Elena joined as a co-founder. She didn't take a salary, neither of them did. They worked out of Marcus's apartment, laptops on a folding table, surviving on cheap tacos and ambition. Elena brought connections to worker organizations across the country. Marcus rebuilt the app from the ground up, adding features for collective action, encrypted communication, strike coordination. It was hard. There were days Marcus wanted to quit. Days when the server crashed, when users complained, when he had $12 in his bank account and rent was due in 3 days. He picked up extra shifts. He sold his TV, his bike, everything he didn't absolutely need. But slowly, ShiftBridge grew. 10,000 users. 20,000. 50,000. News outlets started noticing. A local Portland paper ran a story. Former dishwasher builds app to empower gig workers. Then a tech blog picked it up. Then another. Marcus didn't tell his family. He didn't want to jinx it. And honestly, part of him didn't want them to know until he'd really made it. Until there was no possible way they could dismiss it. 6 months after Elena joined, they got an email that changed everything. A venture capital firm in San Francisco wanted to meet. Marcus stared at the email, his heart pounding. Elena looked over his shoulder and grinned. "Pack a bag," she said. "We're going to the big leagues." For the first time in his life, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The next 18 months were a whirlwind Marcus could barely process. The meeting in San Francisco went better than he'd imagined. The venture capital firm, Horizon Ventures, saw the potential immediately. They offered him $2 million in seed funding. Marcus and Elena negotiated hard, making sure they kept majority control of the company. They walked out with a deal that gave them runway to hire a real team, scale the platform, and finally pay themselves a salary. Marcus cried in the rental car on the way back to the airport. Not from relief, from disbelief. He'd gone from living on peanut butter sandwiches to having $2 million of investor confidence in his vision. Within 3 months, ShiftBridge had a real office in downtown Portland, a small space. But they hired 6 people, 2 engineers, a designer, a community manager, a marketing lead, and an operations coordinator. The energy in that cramped room was electric. Everyone believed in the mission. They weren't just building an app. They were building something that mattered. Marcus worked harder than ever, but it felt different now. He wasn't alone. He wasn't drowning. He had a team that respected him, challenged him, pushed him to be better. For the first time in his life, people looked at him and saw a leader. ShiftBridge's user base exploded. 100,000 users. Then 300,000. Workers from across the country were using it to organize, to fight back against unfair wages, to support each other. The platform helped coordinate a successful strike at a major delivery company in Chicago. News outlets covered it. Marcus and Elena were invited to speak on podcasts, at conferences, at universities. A year after the funding round, Marcus looked at his bank account and didn't recognize the number. He'd gone from $12 to 6 figures in savings. He moved out of his cramped studio into a modest 1-bedroom apartment with actual sunlight and a kitchen that didn't smell like mildew. He bought a used car. Nothing fancy, a reliable Toyota. He didn't need flashy. He just needed stability. One afternoon, Marcus was walking through downtown Portland when he passed a newsstand. His breath caught. The cover of a major tech magazine featured a photo of him and Elena with the headline, "The Gig Economy Rebels: How ShiftBridge is Changing Labor in America." He bought 3 copies. He stood on the sidewalk, staring at his own face on that glossy cover, and felt something crack open inside him. Pride. Real, earned pride. That weekend, he ran into an old acquaintance from high school at a coffee shop. Kevin Marsh. They'd been in the same math class, though Kevin had barely acknowledged Marcus back then. "Marcus Webb?" Kevin said, his eyes wide. "Holy shit, man. I saw that article about your company. That's insane. You're killing it." Marcus smiled, a little awkward. "Thanks. Just trying to build something useful." "Dude, you're in the New York Times, the Journal. Everyone's talking about ShiftBridge. You're like a legit success story." Kevin shook his head in disbelief. "I always thought. I mean, back in high school, you seemed kind of lost." Marcus offered. "Yeah, but man, look at you now." After Kevin left, Marcus sat with his coffee, replaying the conversation. People were noticing. Not just strangers, but people from his past. People who dismissed him, overlooked him, written him off. 2 months later, Marcus was invited to speak at a tech conference in Austin. 1,500 people in the audience. He stood on that stage, looking out at the crowd, and talked about his journey, the failures, the shame, the moment he decided to stop living for other people's approval. "I spent most of my life thinking I was worthless because the people I loved told me I was," Marcus said, his voice steady. "But the truth is, their opinion was never the problem. My belief in their opinion was. The day I stopped trying to prove myself to them and started building for myself, that's the day everything changed." The applause was deafening. After the talk, dozens of people came up to him, aspiring entrepreneurs, fellow developers, people who'd felt invisible their whole lives. They shook his hand. They thanked him. They told him his story gave them hope. Marcus realized something profound that day. He wasn't the failure his family had painted him as. He never had been. He'd just been searching for the right path in a world that only valued one kind of success. And now, for the first time, he wasn't searching anymore. He'd found it. But he still hadn't told his family. And part of him wondered, when they finally found out, what would they say? That question was about to be answered in the most unexpected way. Marcus was in his office reviewing quarterly projections when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Hello." "Marcus." His father's voice. Controlled, formal. "We need to talk." Marcus's stomach tightened. They hadn't spoken in over 2 years. About what? "I think you know." Richard had seen the articles. Of course he had. ShiftBridge had been featured in the Wall Street Journal 3 days ago. The headline read, "Tech startup ShiftBridge raises $15 million Series A, aims to revolutionize gig economy." There was a photo of Marcus shaking hands with investors. His father couldn't have missed it. "Can you come by the house this weekend?" Richard asked. "Your mother would like to see you. Jason will be here too." Marcus felt the old instinct rising, the need to please, to show up, to prove himself worthy. Then he remembered who he was now. "I'm pretty busy," Marcus said. "Maybe next month." There was a pause. "Marcus, it's been too long. We're family. Are we?" The words hung in the air. "I'll come by Saturday," Marcus finally said. "But I can't stay long." When Marcus pulled up to his parents' house that weekend, Jason's Mercedes was already there. So was his Uncle Steve's Lexus. Marcus took a deep breath and walked to the door. His mother answered, her smile bright but strained. "Marcus, look at you. You look so healthy." The house smelled the same. Rosemary and leather. The family was gathered in the living room, his father in his recliner, Jason on the couch with Emily, Uncle Steve near the fireplace. Everyone turned when Marcus entered. "There he is," Uncle Steve said, standing up with his hand extended. "The man of the hour. We've been reading all about you, Marcus. Very impressive stuff." Marcus shook his hand, wary. "Thanks." Sit," his father said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "We wanted to talk to you about some exciting opportunities." Marcus sat slowly. "Opportunities?" Richard leaned forward. "Your Uncle Steve has been consulting with some major players in real estate tech. They're looking for innovative solutions, and when he told them about ShiftBridge, they were very interested. There could be some strategic partnerships here. Significant ones. We could bring you into our network," Uncle Steve added. "Help you scale faster. Open doors you didn't even know existed." Marcus looked around the room. Jason wouldn't meet his eyes. His mother was smiling, but it looked forced. "You want to help me?" Marcus asked slowly. "Of course," Richard said. "Your family. We support each other." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Where was this support 3 years ago? When I showed you my first app and you called me an embarrassment. The room went silent. "Marcus, that's not fair," Catherine said quietly. "Your father was just." "He was right," Marcus interrupted, standing up. "I was going nowhere. I was a failure. You all thought so. You told me so." Jason pretended he didn't know me. He looked at his brother. "Remember that? At the diner." Jason's jaw tightened. "Marcus, It's fine," Marcus said calmly. "I'm not angry anymore. I just want to be clear about something." He looked at his father. "You don't get to ignore me when I'm struggling and then show up with opportunities when I'm successful. That's not how this works." Richard's face hardened. "We're your family." "No," Marcus said. "Family shows up when things are hard. Family believes in you when nobody else does. You didn't do that. So now, when I don't need you anymore, you don't get to act like you were always on my side." "You're being childish," Richard said, his voice rising. "Maybe," Marcus said. "But I'm also being honest. I spent my whole life trying to earn your respect. I'm done. I don't need it anymore." Uncle Steve shifted uncomfortably. "Marcus, think about what you're—" "I have thought about it," Marcus said. "For years. And here's what I know. ShiftBridge is mine. My vision, my work, my team. I don't need your network. I don't need your doors. I already opened my own." He looked at his mother. She was staring at her hands, tears in her eyes. "Mom, if you actually want to be in my life, not because I'm successful, but because I'm your son, call me. We can have coffee. We can talk. But it has to be real." Then he walked to the door. "Marcus, wait," Jason called out. Marcus turned. His brother was standing now, his face conflicted. "I'm sorry," Jason said quietly. "For that night at the diner. I was wrong." Marcus nodded. "Yeah, you were." He left without another word. As he drove away, Marcus felt something he'd never felt after leaving that house, free. "You know what I learned? Success isn't about proving people wrong. That's what I thought for so long. I thought if I could just show them, show my father, my brother, everyone who doubted me, that I was worth something, then I'd finally feel complete. But that day, driving away from that house, I realized something profound. I didn't need them to see me. I already saw myself. 3 months after that confrontation, ShiftBridge hit 1 million users. We were featured on the cover of Time magazine. The article was titled, "The Quiet Revolution: How One App is Giving Power Back to Workers." There was a 2-page spread with photos of our team, quotes from workers whose lives had changed, analysis of our impact on the labor movement. My phone exploded with messages. Congratulations from investors, colleagues, strangers. Interview requests from major networks. But the message that mattered most came from Carl Mitchum, the guy who'd walked into that diner years ago and told me I had talent. "Told you," his text read. "Proud of you, kid." I sat in my office that night, after everyone had gone home, and just breathed. The space was quiet. The city lights of Portland glowed through the windows. I thought about the kid I'd been, invisible, ashamed, desperate for approval. And I thought about who I'd become. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole. The real victory wasn't the funding, or the users, or the magazine covers. It was this: I'd learned to trust myself. I'd learned that my worth wasn't determined by anyone else's opinion. I'd learned that failure isn't fatal, giving up is. A week later, my mother called. Not my father, just her. "Can we meet?" she asked, her voice small. "Just the two of us?" We met at a quiet cafe near the waterfront. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. "I read the Time article," she said. "All of it. I read about how you built ShiftBridge from nothing. How you slept 4 hours a night, sold everything you owned, worked yourself to exhaustion." Her voice cracked. And I realized I never asked. I never asked what you were going through. I just assumed you were giving up. I stirred my coffee, watching the cream swirl. I wasn't giving up. I was just lost. And I needed someone to believe I could find my way. "I'm sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I should have believed in you. I should have stood up for you. I didn't, and that's something I'll regret for the rest of my life." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I forgive you, Mom. But I need you to understand something. I can't go back to pretending. I can't show up to family dinners and act like the last decade didn't happen. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be real. No more comparisons to Jason. No more measuring my worth by Dad's standards." She nodded, squeezing my hand. "Real. I promise." We talked for 2 hours. Really talked. She told me about her own struggles, her own disappointments, the ways she'd felt trapped by expectations. I told her about the nights I'd cried on my apartment floor, about the moments I'd wanted to quit, about the people who'd saved me when I needed saving most. When we left, she hugged me tight. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Not because of ShiftBridge, because of who you are." Those words healed something I didn't know was still broken. My father never apologized. Jason and I eventually had a beer together, cleared the air, established a cautious but honest relationship. Uncle Steve sent a LinkedIn request that I ignored. The family dynamic shifted, but I was okay with that. I didn't need their validation anymore. What I needed, I'd already found: a purpose that mattered, a team that believed in the mission, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've earned your place in the world. 6 months later, ShiftBridge won a national award for social impact. I brought Elena, Priya, Carl, and Denise, the people who'd actually been there. We celebrated at a dive bar in Portland, laughing, telling old stories, dreaming about what came next. And here's the truth I want you to understand. The greatest victory in my life wasn't proving my family wrong. It was proving myself right. Right that I had something to offer. Right that I was capable. Right that I deserved to take up space in this world. That's the lesson. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Just the simple, powerful act of choosing yourself when no one else will. And once you do that, everything changes. 2 years have passed since that award ceremony at the dive bar. ShiftBridge is now one of the fastest-growing labor platforms in North America. We have over 3 million users across 40 states. We've helped coordinate hundreds of successful negotiations between workers and companies. We've been studied by labor economists, praised by unions, and yes, criticized by corporations who don't like that we're giving workers a voice. That criticism? It tells me we're doing something right. Elena is now our COO. She's built relationships with labor organizations worldwide. We're expanding to Canada and the UK next year. She's become one of my closest friends, the sister I never had. We fight sometimes, disagree on strategy, push each other hard. But we trust each other completely. The team has grown to 45 people. We're still in Portland, but in a real office now with standing desks, a kitchen that's always stocked, and walls covered with thank you notes from workers whose lives we've touched. Every Monday morning, we read some of those notes aloud. It keeps us grounded, reminds us why we do this. Financially, I'm comfortable. Not billionaire comfortable. ShiftBridge isn't that kind of company, and I'm okay with that. We're profitable, sustainable, and mission-driven. I own a modest house in southeast Portland with a yard and a dog named Franklin. I drive the same Toyota. I don't need more. My relationship with my mother has healed. We have coffee every few weeks. She asks real questions now. She listens. She tells me about her own life, her book club, her volunteering at the library, her frustrations with my father. We're building something genuine slowly. My father and I are cordial. We see each other at holidays, exchange pleasantries, but there's a distance there that may never close. I've made peace with that. Some relationships can't be fully repaired, and that's okay. I don't owe him reconciliation. I owe myself honesty. Jason and I have found our footing. We're different people, always have been. But we've learned to appreciate each other without competition. He asks me for advice sometimes about management, about finding meaning in work. I ask him about balancing career and family. He's a good father to his kids. I respect that. Last month, Jason invited me to Grace's 6th birthday party. I almost said no old habits, but I went. I sat in their backyard, ate cake with 5-year-olds, and watched Grace open presents. When she saw me, she ran over and hugged my legs. "Uncle Marcus, did you bring me something?" I handed her a wrapped box. Inside was a beginner's coding kit, colorful blocks that teach basic programming logic. Jason raised an eyebrow. "She's 6, Marcus." "I was taking apart radios at 6, I said, smiling. "Who knows? Maybe she'll build something incredible." Grace opened it and her eyes lit up. "Cool. Can you show me how it works?" We spent an hour on the patio floor, building simple programs, laughing when they didn't work, cheering when they did. Jason watched from the doorway, something unreadable in his expression. Later, as I was leaving, he walked me to my car. "Thank you," he said. "For coming. For being here." "Of course." He hesitated, then said, "I think about that night at the diner a lot. I was ashamed of you then. Now I'm just ashamed of myself." I looked at him. Really looked at him. The golden child, the success story, the one who'd had everything handed to him. And I realized he'd been trapped too. Trapped by expectations, by the need to be perfect, by the fear of disappointing our father. "We're good, Jason," I said. "We're both doing the best we can." He nodded, his eyes wet. As I drove home that evening, Franklin's head out the window, the Portland sunset painting the sky orange and pink, I thought about the kid I used to be. The one who felt invisible. The one who believed he was worthless because that's what he'd been told. I wished I could go back and tell him, "You're going to make it. It's going to be harder than you can imagine and lonelier, and you're going to want to quit 1,000 times. But you won't. And one day, you'll realize that the people who couldn't see your worth were just looking in the wrong direction." That's why I wanted to tell this story. Not to brag. Not to seek revenge. But to reach that one person out there who feels invisible right now. Who's been told they're not enough. Who's struggling in the dark, wondering if it'll ever get better. It does. But only if you choose yourself. Only if you stop waiting for permission and start building the life you deserve. That's the real story. And it's still being written. If you've made it this far, thank you. Truly. I know this was a long story, and your time is valuable. The fact that you stayed with me through all of this, through the pain, the struggle, the small victories, and the hard-won peace, means more than you know. I've been thinking a lot about why I decided to share this publicly. For years, I kept my journey private. I didn't want pity. I didn't want people to think I was bitter or looking for sympathy. But recently, I realized something. Stories like mine need to be told. Not because they're unique, they're not. Millions of people feel invisible every single day. Millions of people are told they're not good enough, smart enough, worthy enough. And millions of people believe it. I believed it for almost 30 years. But here's what I want you to understand. The people who doubt you are often just projecting their own fears and limitations. My father didn't see my potential because he only understood one definition of success. My brother didn't defend me because he was too afraid of losing his own position. My family didn't believe in me because they couldn't imagine a path different from the one they knew. None of that was about me. It was about them. And the same is true for you. If someone in your life is telling you that you're a failure, that you're wasting your time, that you'll never amount to anything, that's their story, not yours. You get to write your own story. It won't be easy. It won't be fast. There will be nights when you're exhausted, broke, and ready to give up. There will be moments when you wonder if they were right all along. But if you keep going, if you choose yourself even when no one else does, you'll find something more valuable than their approval. You'll find your own. I'm not special. I'm not a genius. I don't have some magical gift that you don't have. What I had was stubbornness, a little bit of luck, and the willingness to bet on myself when the odds were terrible. That's it. That's the whole formula. You can do this too. Whatever this is for you. Maybe it's starting a business. Maybe it's going back to school. Maybe it's leaving a toxic relationship or finally pursuing that dream you've been putting off. Maybe it's just waking up tomorrow and deciding you're worth fighting for. Whatever it is, I'm telling you right now, you're capable. You're enough. And you don't need anyone's permission to prove it. ShiftBridge is still growing. We're going to keep fighting for workers, keep building tools that give people power, keep showing up for the overlooked and underestimated. Because I was one of them. I know what it's like to be invisible. And I'll spend the rest of my career making sure other people don't have to feel that way. But this story isn't really about ShiftBridge. It's about the moment you stop living for other people's expectations and start living for your own truth. That's the moment everything changes. Not overnight, not magically, but gradually, steadily, undeniably. I still have hard days. I still doubt myself sometimes. I still carry scars from those years of feeling worthless. But I also carry something stronger. The knowledge that I survived. That I built something meaningful. That I chose myself when it mattered most. And now, I'm asking you to do the same. So here's what I want from you. If this story resonated with you, if any part of it felt familiar, painful, or hopeful, I want you to do 3 things. First, leave a comment below telling me about the moment you chose yourself. Or if you haven't had that moment yet, tell me what's holding you back. Let's build a community of people who refuse to be invisible. I read every single comment, and I respond when I can. Second, if this story gave you something, hope, perspective, motivation, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. I'm going to keep sharing stories like this, stories about real people overcoming real struggles. You being here makes this possible. Third, tell me what you want to hear next. What stories matter to you? What struggles are you facing? What would help you right now? Drop your suggestions in the comments. This channel is for you, and I want to create content that actually makes a difference in your life. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing that your story matters, because it does. Remember, they called me a failure until they saw my name in the newspapers. But the truth is, I stopped being a failure the moment I stopped believing them. You're not a failure either. You're just getting started. Now go prove it.